Aw, shit. Here we go again.
Welcome to the Sloppy Book Club podcast. I'm Jenny.
And I'm Celese, and welcome to season 3, episode 16. It's a special episode with Eve Marian. She is our special guest today. We are excited to be chatting with her. She's going to be talking about her new Bodyguard series, Protecting Nikole. If you are not familiar with her work, get familiar because she has a really good billionaire series. So
yes.
I'm excited to chat with her.
Yeah. Do you have a drink today?
I do. So since it's the summer, I've been trying some teas, and this is an iced water infusion tea, and I add mandarin oranges and sliced strawberries or diced strawberries. And in the tea, it's a strawberry lemon orange blossom, and it's been my go-to. Instead of juice, I've been doing this tea, and it's so good. So
it looks yummy.
It's very refreshing, just enough sweetness. And then, of course, I have to add more fruit for a little bit more sugar.
Obviously.
But it's been really good.
Good. I have a mountain blackberry, clearly Canadian sparkling water, and there's blueberries in it. So that's my fancy fruit. Yeah. All right. So let's
kind of refresh. Stay refreshed.
I absolutely love these. They're so good. All right. So she's here. So let's just bring her on in.
Yes.
Hi. Hi.
Oh, I love that you have a drink in front of you.
Oh, good. It's so tropical.
Yes, I love it.
It is anything but tropical here, so I had to get into the mood.
Nice. We are so happy to have you on. We're super excited to finally meet you.
I'm super excited to be here. I'm telling you, your podcast and your Instagram was one of the first that I followed when I joined Bookstagram. And I absolutely adore you guys. So I'm a little fangirling here, and I'm super nervous.
No, stop.
We were both like taking our deep breaths, and we're like, we're so nervous.
So we weren't sure if you were gonna have a drink or not. So we kind of already did ours, but we can tell you what we have, and then you can tell us what you have. But before I do that, everyone, this is Eve Marian. Thank you for coming on. All right, so I have a sparkling water. It's a mountain blackberry, clearly Canadian, because that's my go-to drink this summer. Sparkling water.
Wow, I love it. Did you know I was Canadian? I felt like I'm honored here now.
I feel like I did know that, but I wasn't sure. But I've been drinking it for like 2 months now.
And he must have been like, I know there's something that is relatable, is it? But I'm not gonna say it.
Funny.
That's too funny. So I was just telling Jenny, my go-to lately it's been this tea, fruit infusion water kind of thing. And I add like my mandarin oranges and some slices of strawberries, and it's a strawberry lemon orange blossom tea, and it's like an iced infused tea, and I've been loving it because I'm a huge juice drinker, and I'm just like trying to stay away from doing that. So this has been a nice little refreshing sweetness for me.
Wow, you ladies are so healthy. I thought
we're normally not.
We're normally not, yeah. I'm trying to better.
I'm tired.
Well, I've got a San Pellegrino actually, and I think it's Aranciata Rossa. It's one of my favorite flavors, so it's got a bit of sugar in it.
Okay, so maybe I should get that next time.
Yes, normally we have drinks. It's early for us.
So our first question to all our listeners is, we usually want to start off by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself. What is something you want, our listeners and future readers to know a little bit about you?
This was the question I was most nervous about.
We'll get it out of the way.
I think that's why I write characters. I just don't know what to say about myself. Well, let's see. As I mentioned, I'm Italian Canadian. I worked in journalism, and then I got into public relations because it was really tough chasing ambulances and writing those stories. They really got to me. So then I got into PR, and that was loads of fun. And then the pandemic hit, and I had to switch because I couldn't do events anymore, and my kids were home. And shout out to all teachers, because I really got a taste of how, I know, Celeste, you're a teacher. I know how difficult that is. So although my mother begged me to be a teacher, I know it was the right career path not to go that way. But
I do suggest people, like, just think about it. Just think about it. It's not for the faint of heart, for sure.
Definitely. And these are my kids, and I know how to deal with them. When that happened, I just had some extra time between their lessons, and I just kind of just wrote. I finally got back to writing creatively because I'd been writing journalism and, press releases and those things. And I just fell in love with it again. And, a couple of friends said, this is really good. And you're just being kind and, all that kind of stuff. And you just put it out there and just get better and better and keep drafting and rewriting until you finally have something that you don't hate. And you're like, maybe I can send this to an editor and see how it goes. So that's a bit about me. It wasn't a straight journey here. I took many different paths to get here. And I still feel like I'm on this journey, definitely, like learning and progressing and getting excited about the next story and the next characters. But
awesome.
that's a bit about me.
Oh, so clearly your inspiration and your go-to for writing was the whole pandemic starting. But before that, did you ever want to actually write novels rather than being in journalism?
Definitely. So when I was in the 5th grade, I would write stories for my 5th grade class, and shout out to my teacher who would allow me to do that, like write the stories and present them and read them to the class. It would be story time. And she actually sent me to a young authors conference. And at the time, I loved it, but I don't know why. No one really encouraged that as a career, writing and creatively. I guess when I was in school, it just didn't seem like, the safe career path to do. So they said, oh, you could write. Why don't you get into journalism? And I think I was sort of led that way. It was really nice to find my way back to a place creatively to just express myself and have fun. It's not even expressing myself. I feel like I'm one of those weird people that would look at a situation and try to understand their story. And my husband's like, they're just two people having coffee. I'm like, I know, but don't you want to know their story? He's like, no, most people don't. I'm like, okay, it's just me. That is definitely a me thing.
Well, I'm super glad you started writing. And now that I know that you're Italian, I could definitely see the inspiration behind these babies. Because Italian, FMC, this is a paranormal romance, right? And she was Italian, and I could definitely see where you got your inspiration from.
A lot of so my parents don't speak English. I still only speak Italian to them. So a lot of the Italian characters are based off of my parents. And even in Violet Sky, that story is sort of my parents' story of how they met. So I definitely started writing that story almost as like an ode to my heritage, to kind of just get back to what it was like for my parents to leave a country, not know the language, and start fresh, and it'd feel like a brand new world. So like when Michaela gets into this brand new world, like how do you deal with that? And I think my mom was a superhero for figuring it out. Unfortunately, because she doesn't speak the language, she hasn't read any of my books. But it's really sweet because people will go up to her and say, oh, I read your daughter's book, and they'll tell her about it. And she's like, you need to translate that book. One day I will, I promise.
One day.
Although I'm not sure about the next ones that are spicier. I'm not sure how I feel about those.
Well, just translate those, the paranormal.
The paranormal one.
That's the highest spice level, like maybe like a 1.5 that I'm willing to go to with her.
Well, I recently read The Mix-Up, and I know that's like in your billionaire romance, and I loved it. I was just telling Jenny, like, oh my God, I have to, become familiar. And I really, really enjoyed it. And I love like the little odes to, your heritage in that book where it's like, her, I believe it's like a nonna, right? Is that how you
Yeah,
say it? And how they're
exactly.
always cooking, and like every time she gets home, she always smells like everything her brother or her, grandmother is cooking. So I love those little bits of family elements in that. Now, as an indie author, what has it been like for you when it comes to like marketing and social media?
Mhm.
And how is that process for you? How are you navigating that?
Definitely, that was the most overwhelming at first, was to have to switch hats between writer to publisher to marketer. And it was one thing when I was marketing other people's products, but it's so difficult, I found, to market my own. But the reverse of that was I didn't realize how much I would love connecting with readers through marketing, through Instagram, through TikToks, just have a lot of fun out there. And that's what I realized, just put the ego away. Don't worry about looking silly or anything like that. I was a reader first. So I always would go into it as, okay, what do I want to read? What am I in the mood for? And that's how I try to connect with readers. And so far it's worked, just making light of the fact that we love our book boyfriends. Even though I love my husband, he is absolutely a doll. Like, he is such a wonderful man, but he knows that my book boyfriends are like,
yeah, they just hit different. It's a whole different world.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And luckily he's not threatened by it. So it's all good. In fact, I love, speaking of the mix up, we went to a destination wedding, and he just pulled out the book on the airplane and just started reading it. And the lady next to him was like, "Oh, what are you reading?" He's like, "Oh, well, it's a romance. You should really pick it up." So
nice.
He was super supportive.
Good husband.
And she did end up buying the book.
That.
So I'm like, oh, thank you.
Oh, that's really
I
sweet.
love that.
So when
I
you
would be so nervous.
when you start writing, like, what's your like whole ambiance, your whole setup? What do you like to have with you? Drinks, snacks, everything?
Well, I always forget to bring the snacks because I'll sit down, I'll start writing. I'm like, oh, I forgot the snacks. So I got to grab nuts or popcorn or just something just to kind of munch. But I'm one of those strange writers where I actually need it to be quiet. I know a lot of writers have music in their background or, things happening, but I really, really enjoy the silence. I love getting lost in wherever I'm writing and picturing that scene. Oftentimes I picture it as a movie. And as I'm writing, I'm listening to what's happening in the background. And that's how I write. That being said, I have a hard time focusing because it's rarely quiet when you have two kids around.
Mm-hmm.
So what I found really helpful for anyone that wants to start writing is get a writing partner. So I have a friend who's also an author, and we'll just do this. We'll get on FaceTime together and we'll talk and we'll jab and we'll complain. And then we're like, okay, we need to write for 30 minutes. And then just still with each other on FaceTime, we'll just start writing. And I know I have that accountability partner of someone saying, okay, how far did you get? How many words did you get down? And that really helps like zero me in. Otherwise, I could sit all day staring at a blank screen and nothing comes up.
I feel like that would distract me so much, having someone there. It's like, what do you want to talk about? That would be so
no,
distracting.
we're very disciplined. We don't talk until the 30 minutes are over. But we're also like big yappers. So we know we need that 5 minutes to talk. And then we're like, okay, we've talked too much. It's been 7 minutes. We need to get back to writing.
I've seen that a lot of authors doing these like writer sprints now together with other authors, and I find it really enjoyable. Sometimes they'll go like on live and do it, so like readers can join in, or other aspiring writers. So like they'll do like these 30-minute sprints, and I was always interested in like how that came about, because like Jenny, I was like, I feel like I would be distracted, but at the same time, the accountability kicks in. It's just like, okay, let's get to writing, and then just, bang it out, and then talk. And sometimes you need to talk things through to someone.
Yes.
Like if a scene isn't happening the way you want it to, having, someone to help you through that. So I find that to be really cool.
Yes. That has helped me with writer's block so much, because sometimes I just get into my own head that, oh, this scene won't work or this is not going to work. And then I'll just explain it to her and she'll be like, well, why don't you just do this? Oh, I never thought of that. So it's really great.
It's funny you say that because that was leading into my next question of like, how do you get through writer's block? Like, what are some of those things, you can advise aspiring writers, or what works for you when it comes to that?
For me, I guess you have to figure out where there's a writer block coming from. So for me, it's usually like, oh, the story is not good enough, or the story is really boring. So I'm really anxious about that. So what's helped me is to just write out the description of where the people are. And I find that when I write a description, there's no pressure to write plot. There's no pressure to write the character or motives or any of that stuff. So that at least when I have words on the page, I feel like, oh, I've accomplished something. I've written 200 words. And by that time, I've kind of settled into the scene, and I can, in the future, I can remove it. But I find that I never do that. That kind of sets the scene, and I kind of like it there. 200 words isn't rambling, and it really sets the reader to be like, okay, where are we now? Especially when you write a paranormal, world building is so important. So I found that I did that a lot with Violet Sky, is just explain where they are in that scene. And that really helped push me through to the next one.
Nice. Awesome. So you finish a book. What do you do after? What do you do for fun? Do you have any hobbies?
Oh, that's a good question. Hobbies. I'm terribly not athletic, so I don't. I'll go for a walk. That's about it. Usually just go out to dinner with the family, just celebrate. My kids and my husband are really my greatest supporters. They're just so wonderful. My 11-year-old son was so cute. He said, Mom, you're on a podcast today? I'm like, yeah, I'm really nervous. He's like, Mom, you really made it.
That's so sweet.
That is the sweet. Kids are the best, especially when they could give you compliments like that, and especially if you're feeling nervous about something, and like how proud they are, and they show that to you. I love that.
and really, like, this journey hasn't been easy. Every career has ups and downs. So when you're going through those downs and you're thinking, okay, maybe this is my last book, and then my daughter says something, and I just realized this is the motivational talk I would give them. Don't give up. It's not easy. Success isn't overnight. It's a lot of work. And as long as you love what you do, you don't have to worry about what you're measuring success as. So is success finishing that next book? Is success finding a character that I never thought I could write, and then actually accomplishing that and writing it? So I think that's the other thing, is helping to define success, because I think so many times in society, it is a financial number, where if someone has a career, it's like, well, they've made it if they've hit 6 figures, or they've made it if they've hit this number. And I find that is one really unrealistic and also demeaning, because sometimes even if you were to reach that goal, you may not be happy, because I find that, right? Like, there's so many people out there, or like I've heard, where they say they've hit that number that they wanted to hit, and it didn't give them that sense of happiness that they thought it would. So I'm trying to teach my kids and myself that set goals that will actually make you happy, so that when you reach them, you're proud of yourself.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's sweet. Well, so tell your kids we said hi.
Yeah. Oh, we'll keep it PG for now, so like they can listen and see you, and then we'll let them know when it's like, okay.
Yes.
Hey, go to bed.
I know. I know. Well, someone did ask me that question about my kids and me writing like spicier books, and my kids haven't read the Billionaire series. But I think it's one of the things that I'm trying to, even myself, like, I grew up in a very we don't talk about sex kind of family, in a very prudish, I guess, lifestyle. So I'm really trying to even unwrap the terms when other people say to me, like, oh, you write spicy novels, like it's a bad thing, and I'm supposed to be ashamed of that. And I'm trying to really understand now that there's nothing that we should be ashamed of. It's a natural thing. Everyone falls in love. It's beautiful when there's a great love story behind it. I'm really embracing the fact that, okay, when she's old enough, she can read them, but it shouldn't be something that I should be ashamed of. So I'm really, I have my co-author actually writes kinky romance. And she's like, I'm at the PTA meeting and I can't talk about my business that everyone else is talking about because she's kind of ashamed of it. But at the same time, it's like, we really shouldn't be. We're not doing anything shameful. We're talking about love and romance and family and how that all comes together. So I'm also, kind of grappling with how to come to terms with that as well, like my personal life. And that's why I have a pen name, which ironically isn't very Italian at all. But it kind of, the pen name is a bit of my name mixed in there. So it still feels like me. But I just felt like I wanted to separate from my family, my work from my personal life, because I didn't want for them to deal with anything that I've written, if that makes sense, right? Like for the kids at school to say anything to them, or something like that.
Makes sense. That's understandable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And even with starting the podcast, like with my own family, they always knew I was an avid reader, but they never were really like, oh, so what are you reading, what it's about? Like sometimes they would, and you kind of like, oh, it's just a romance and just like keep it moving. But then with my podcast, the first couple episodes, my dad listened to some of them, and I'm just like, oh my God. But at the same time, he was very okay with it. He didn't have anything, negative to say. He was just like, at times I was just like, okay, maybe I shouldn't be listening to this. But at the same time, it was just like, he was proud of me just being out there and, talking freely. And, even my mom still listens. And at times I'm just like, oh, you listened to that episode? Oh, okay. The monster romance. Oh yeah. The tentacles. Yeah. So even my dad was one time was like, what's a monster romance? And I had to explain it to him, and he was just like, oh, okay. I don't want to.
That's usually the reaction I get when I talk about monster romances. Like, wait, what? Are they actually monsters? I'm like, yes. Yes, they are.
I was like, there's spider ones, there's under the sea creature ones, and they're just like, but how? And then they're like, so being okay with it, that was something I was a little bit nervous about, but I'm like, I also have 2 kids of my own, it's gonna happen.
Absolutely. And I don't know why I felt the same way too. And it's like, we shouldn't feel that way, right? It's fun. It's an escape. Why not? I really do. And so I'm kind of standing my ground now in conversations when I say, I used to be like, oh, I'm a romance author, and kind of wait for the reaction. And now I'm a romance writer. The way I would say I'm a teacher, I'm a lawyer, just, there's no waiting for the reaction anymore.
Now,
absolutely.
You are in marketing and you're writing, but is there another career path that you envisioned for yourself, or thought you would go into besides writing or marketing?
Well, I always said I wanted to be Oprah when I grew up. That was my dream.
Who doesn't?
Yes.
You get a car. You get a car. I want to be able to do that.
She made people happy. She was intelligent. She had her own show. That's who I wanted to be. But I don't know. I think and if it wasn't that, I always wanted to help people. So be in a field of nursing or something where I could be of service. I think that really, talk about having a job that gives you fulfillment and happiness, because it is something that, I give it to everyone who is in a job of service. It's not easy to get up every day, because not everyone is thankful or grateful for the work that you do, but you do it. And I think you have to have a calling. So it wasn't my career path, but I could definitely see myself being fulfilled and happy in something like that.
Yeah.
Who knows? I still have a lot of years ahead of me, though. It could happen.
Well, most of my patients are very grateful because they can't speak. They're just little babies.
Oh, that's right. You're the ICU nurse, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
babies.
Little babies.
But I'm sure you see the parents' faces, like, that must, I can't even think about that. I would get way too emotional. Like, you would have to, like, how do you get through those emotions? I love, like, I'm interviewing you now. Look at that.
It's more good than bad and sad is usually what I tell people, because people always say, oh, it's so sad there, like, why do you like working there? It's really more happy moments than anything else. Like, you're helping a parent raise a baby who needed ICU time. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, whenever I would have a really bad day at work in PR, I would call my cousin, who was a head nurse in the ICU department for kids, hospital sick children, and I'd be like, oh, the nail polishes didn't get delivered today and we couldn't do the show. And she's like, do you want to hear about my day? And then I said to her, nope, all good, I totally get it. So it really puts perspective also in life. I think, you know, you have really good perspective on what the big problems are in life, and you kind of are able to get through it.
Yeah,
for sure.
All right, so I think it's time that we start talking about your book, your latest release, Protecting Nikole. All right, so do you want to tell us a little bit about what it is? No spoilers in case people want to read it, which we do. So keep it simple.
Well, I always love the idea of a strong woman with a protective man. That's always been my dynamic that I really enjoy. And strong to me doesn't always have to be that sassy character. Like, I love those too. But there are certain characters that I feel are strong because of what they've overcome in the past. And they may not be strong on the outside of what people see, but they're quite strong on the inside. And it's not the idea of a male saving her. It's the idea of them saving each other and finding each other and helping each other on this journey. So although it's kind of like a bodyguard series, I find that the men in this series are really the ones being saved by their women.
I love that so much. It's more of
I really enjoyed writing that. So with Protecting Nikole, I'll just tell you the opening scene because I think it has a funny story. The opening scene was inspired by a cousin of mine who I had dinner with him and his family this past weekend. And he's just getting such a chuckle that his story inspired this first chapter, because it was not a good moment for him where he stood someone up on a first date. And I've given him heck for that. I'm like, I can't believe you did that. You know, all those things. And then I thought, well, and then I had the inspiration of like, he's such a great guy. I'm like, he needs a redeeming arc. I felt like. So I thought, okay, why would somebody do that? Why would someone literally look at that person and then drive by and continue driving? Like, really stood them up. And I'd have to, I'm like, how? Right. And then how does that woman deal with it? Because she saw him look at her and he's looking at him. So it was such an awkward moment.
That awkward moment. Oh my God.
Exactly. So that was such a fun inspiration. I thought, okay, I need to make him redeeming. I need to, like, obviously she can't let him off the hook right away because that was a terrible thing that he did. So that was how the story started. So in this book, Nikole is stood up by Jake. And then Nikole is the daughter of the governor, and the governor has received threatening emails, and she's hired a bodyguard who is none other than the man who stood Nikole up. So I thought that would be a fun premise to go with.
I love that. Make him grovel and
exactly.
I love
absolutely. And then I have the second book. So what I've done with this series is sort of what's called a rapid release, where I spent the winter writing the 3 books so that when I release them, people are not waiting too long. I'm releasing them only 3 weeks apart. So Protecting Christina will be coming out in very soon, we'll say. And by the end of July, for sure. So July 21st. We'll have Protecting Christina. And I will say this second book was the hardest for me to write because I've never written anyone like Christina before. So she's introduced in Protecting Nikole as the best friend. And I just loved her. She was snarky, but not what's the word? But snarky, but cool about it. Like she was just smart. And she reminded me a bit of, do you remember the character Christina from Grey's Anatomy?
Yes, I
That's
do.
who, yeah,
I love
that's
Grey's
who
Anatomy.
okay. So that's who she kind of reminded me of. And I've never written anyone like that for a romance novel because she couldn't come across as cold or unloving or all those things. And I thought,
Hard
well,
to love sometimes.
someone who's exactly, or she really has a hard shell up and a wall up that she's not letting anyone in. And at the same time, I didn't want to change her when I wrote her love story. I want a man who loves her for who she is, rather than, oh, he's going to just soften her up, right? Because you love Christina for who she is, right? So that was the toughest one to write, was someone who doesn't change, but I still have to make them vulnerable. Because I think that's what love is. You really become vulnerable to that person. You give them your heart. You give them your emotions, your honesty, everything of who you are. At least that's what you're supposed to do.
Right.
And I thought, okay, well, how does someone like that open up or feel comfortable enough to open up? And who is the man worthy enough for someone like Christina, who has a difficult past, in this case, protecting Christina? She has a difficult path. And how do you let that in? So yeah, like this series, like I said, it's definitely about bodyguards, but for me, it's always the emotions behind love. Like my books are going to make you feel, as you saw with The Mix-Up. It's currently my #1 bestseller because I think
I really enjoyed it. I really did. And I was going to ask you what inspired this new book of yours, which you already mentioned. It was a family member. But I guess my next question would be, because of The Mix-Up and your strong female characters, I love that they don't wait for the male main character to come and save them. I like, even in The Mix-Up, there's that one scene in the bedroom, and I honestly thought, the male main character was gonna like somehow be there to save her, and
right.
he wasn't. Like, she did it herself. And sorry if I'm giving that away, but like, I love that. But the fact that the expectation for me as I'm reading is like, oh, he's gonna come and save her, but that doesn't happen. I love that that wasn't what you wrote, and is that how you want all your female main characters? What is the inspiration on that, I guess, when you're writing your female main characters and your male main characters, who are supposed to be their protector, but they're, their own protector as well?
Absolutely. I think you described exactly what my inspiration for my characters are. I find that I actually got some flack for Frances not being a strong character, but I feel like she's one of the strongest characters just because she doesn't like shout or talk back or any of those things, which some of my other characters do in other books. But I feel that doesn't make Frances any weaker than the other characters. It just makes her different. So for example, what was really important to me was there was a scene in The Mix-Up where Colton comes to her and asks her for a favor, and he just automatically assumed that she would say yes because she's a people pleaser and she always says yes. And in that scene, I'm like, she is not saying yes. Like originally I had written it that she'd go along and do it. And then I'm like, no, she is going to say no. And just no. No explanation, no nothing. So I need you to do this, is his question. And she says no. And I was so happy when I put that period after no, because no explanation necessary. So to me, that is strength as well. When you stand up for yourself, you don't have to say much more. You don't need to explain yourself. If you don't want to do something, you just have to say no. So that was a big one.
A teacher in high school, I remember her talking to us and saying, you don't have to explain yourself. If you're saying no, it's no, and that's it. Leave it. No, period. That's it. And I will forever remember that. If I don't want to,
it's not so easy.
No.
And it's not easy to put into practice.
Yeah. You say you was a teacher, and I think it was like a celebrity. I think it was Elizabeth Olsen. She was talking about her two older sisters, Mary Kate and Ashley, and how they said no is a full sentence. No doesn't need to be because. No is a full sentence. When you say no, that's it. That's the beginning and the end. It's a full sentence. And ever since then, I'm like,
that is so good.
I need to live by that. When I say no, I don't need to like give you a reason why. It's just no. that should be
Yeah.
respected.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's difficult because you feel that need to say, oh, I'm really busy, I've got this going, like an explanation. But it's really not necessary, especially when that person doesn't deserve an explanation, like in this case, right? Like he didn't deserve one, so I didn't give her one.
I love that.
But at the same
I love
time,
your female, main characters for that. And that's why I was just like, wow, I really, really like this. And I want to, read the whole series, because I was like, if that's one female main character, I can't wait to see, what else is out there with you.
Well, they're all great.
Thank you. Well, that is my inspiration. I have to say, these characters are who I want to aspire to. It's not easy for me to say no. It's not easy for me to stand up for myself in many situations. So I feel that, I get the opportunity as a writer to like say everything I wanted to say. Do you ever go home after, I don't know, someone may have said something that made you uncomfortable and you're like, oh, I wish I had said something, or oh, in that moment, I should have said this, right? And I feel like I get to relive those moments. I get to correct those wrongs.
It's funny.
Or like
you just wake up saying, I'm going to be like Franny today. And yes.
And again, like Franny's not even like who you would think is such a strong individual, but she has her demons and, she overcomes them, and she does. And I really it was important for me to include a scene where she seeks therapy, because I think too easily in romance novels, it's kind of like, well, love will fix it all, right? And that is not the case. I think it's, really healthy. And I think it's amazing, this generation that's coming up now that is really vulnerable and talking about that and accepting. So I definitely wanted to include that as well.
Yeah. Now you said you wrote all 3 books, like kind of back to back. Do you just like draft out your books? Do you do outlines? Like, how did that process go?
So this is what I meant about like really finding my process. So with Violet Sky, there was never any expectation of publishing. So I just sat there and I just wrote. And it was loads of fun. Like it was the funnest thing I'd ever done. I loved it. And then with the mix up and the first 2 books in that series, I thought, okay, I'm a serious writer now. So I'm going to outline everything. And I did, but I found that when I knew the ending, I didn't have as much pleasure in writing the story, which is funny. Okay. So I enjoy knowing what the character arc is, like what that person's weaknesses or perceived weaknesses are. And I love to write their backstory. And sometimes that backstory may not even make it into the actual novel, but I need to know who they are so that I can write what their response would be in a situation, because the way Nikole would answer a question may not be the way Frances would answer a question because of who they are. Like, we're all different people. And I think our experiences make up our preconceived notions and our reactions to things, right? So that's what I really do. And I try to write less of the plot and have the character, because so many times the characters have run off page for me. Like, oh no, you're not supposed to do that. And then she does. I'm like, oh wait, I love it. So how do I have to fix the whole thing again? And that was just more work and more stressful. So I just find out who the characters are. What's the situation? Kind of like the premise that I told you about with someone being stood up and now that's your bodyguard, and just run with that. And as I go, I'll only map out the next 2 to 3 chapters. I'll only know that far in advance.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
so
it's just more fun.
For you, in this particular book, when we're talking about protecting Nikole, who was the easiest character to write, and who was the most difficult?
That's a tough one. For protecting Nikole, the easiest character for me was Nikole. I really identified as her and some of her vulnerabilities about wanting your family's approval and yet knowing you don't need it. But it's really hard balancing that. It's like, oh, I'm a grown woman, I don't need my mother's approval. But then when she gives it to you, it's like you melt. So I really identified with her. So I found her easy to write. I actually found Jake difficult because, as I said, I didn't like him in the beginning. I didn't like him standing her up. I didn't think that was a really good thing to do. So I had to really dig deep with him and find out what are his demons and what's making him do that, making those kind of choices. And then once I did that, I really started to understand why people make certain decisions. And I really enjoyed him afterwards, but he wasn't easy for me to write. I didn't like him in the beginning. So
and I bet he's who people would love the most, because I feel like when a character is so hard to write, but then eventually you change your mind about them, the reader can feel that. So I feel like that's probably going to be a super popular character.
Yeah. It's really exciting.
Yeah.
Pardon? I didn't hear that last part.
I said you love to hate someone, and then when they're redeemed, you're like, okay, now I get it. Because, we'll probably be, mad with him, just like Nikole was throughout the whole thing. And,
exactly.
We may know things that she doesn't know. So, like, making them get on the same page is probably going to be, like, a good thing to go through and a good process. And one that, is a page turner, because you want the drama. You also want that romance, too. So the tension and the angst, you want that in a good romance.
I know. And I try to stay away from the angst, but I really love it. Like, I'm trying to write like an easy romance novel, and I'm like, no, I need to have something happen to them. It can't be that easy.
Now, if you could spend a day with one of your characters, who would it be and what would you guys do?
Oh, I think it would have to be Haley, who is the third book in the Bodyguard series, Protecting Haley, because Haley is a pop star. And I just think that is so cool. It is completely out of my element. I would love to not even go to a show. I would love to be in the recording studio and see how that all happens. And, I've watched some behind the scenes stuff, and a friend of mine who is a recording artist, she read the book for me to make sure that, I didn't write anything implausible. And it was just, I said, I don't even want to come to one of your shows. I just want to come to one of your recording sessions, because to me, that seemed really, really cool. The way they make like riffs and make that all come together, how they hear a sound and then just make it into a song. I find that really creative and really beautiful.
Yeah. I used to watch, I think it was called Behind the Scenes or Making something, and they would do, it used to be Making the Video on MTV, and before all these music videos will come out, they would do the behind the scenes of how that process was. And I also always was fascinated with, like, how does even the music begin? Like that first, like, note, that first verse, like, how do you even come up with that? Like, you hear a beat and then you're like, okay, here's the song. Like, what? How is that possible?
Same. I'm so fascinated by it. I think it's magic. I really do. I don't know how that happened.
To be creative.
I would think that would be like how we feel about writers and authors. It's like you started with a thought and then you created a whole world. Like you created romances. You created a whole series off of just a thought, just about, this character that came in. And, for this book, it was a relative standing someone up, and you were like, you know what if this did happen? And how would, just like the creativity in that in itself is amazing.
It's interesting because I remember Stephanie Meyer, someone had asked her that question, like, how did you start writing Twilight? And she said it was the scene in the meadow where they're lying down and he's explaining his attraction to her, but how he can't do anything about it. And I thought, wow, like the middle of the book, that's where that originated. But it's true, you don't know where the idea stems from. And for me, with the mix-up, it was the scene in the office where she's holding someone else's resume. That was where the mix-up started for me. And I thought, oh, how would that be if... It's always that what if question for me. I always love that. What would happen if this actually happened in real life? And but I feel at the same time there is a responsibility when you write these characters, because people identify with them, right? So I feel that I need to give them justice. Like, for example, if it's someone who's been through an abusive situation, there has to be justice in the end, because in real life there often isn't, or at least not the way we want it to be. So I feel like at least in fiction, my characters are going to get justice one way or another. It's going to happen.
Right. So we know that this will be 3 books in a series, right? So do you have plans after this series? Do you have any idea? Are you going to stay in the billionaire romance realm? Are you going to go back to paranormal? What is that going to look like for you?
I'm still having way too much fun with the billionaire. I have to say, for me, it's almost a fantasy world as well, building these billionaires. So in this Bodyguard series, there's actually 4 of them. So I need to write Jaeger's story, which is the 4th book. But I feel like there's a couple of side characters that popped up that just take up so much space in my head that they are asking me for a story too. So I think there might be 3 more in this series. It might be a 6-book series.
So it's an open-ended.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, what I love about it is you don't have to read the first to understand the 3rd, right? There's just a bunch of army brothers that have now started a bodyguard business, and it's their way of finding love, right? Their individual stories.
Okay.
I love that.
Now, because I was thinking about it before, so I know like the mix up, there's 3, and then you have Envy. Did that finish? Was that the last one? Because I still need to go back and finish Envy.
That is the last one.
Okay.
And that one, so the end of the choice ends in a cliffhanger. So I will say you have to read the choice before you read Envy. So you have to read the 3rd book before you read the 4th. The first 2 are kind of like on their own. But that, I have to say, Envy is probably one of my favorites as well.
Really? Okay.
It's just, I really like the female character, and I like him. Like he is definitely your morally gray character, right? Like Colton and the other guys, they're just a-holes, but they're not really morally gray. Whereas Giancarlo is. So he was a fun one to write. Yeah. For sure.
The choice was my favorite out of all 3 books. And then I don't know why I just didn't continue on to read Envy, because I knew it the moment that book ended. I was like, I know what she's going to do next. So
exactly. Okay. So when the choice ended, and a friend of mine said, but Giancarlo, like that's the hero in the next book. She's like, I don't even like him. And that to me is such a challenge. Like what we talked about before, like, oh, I'm going to make you love him. Not like him. I'm going to make you love him. So that was my challenge. Like, how do I make someone like Giancarlo, who's the villain, which I guess is very popular in dark romances, but I've never written anything like that. And I wouldn't necessarily call this a dark romance, because I think there are different elements in dark romance that make it a dark romance, but he is definitely your morally gray character. Yeah. You wouldn't want to bring him home to mom.
No. So now, is there a book that you absolutely love that you would recommend to any reader outside of your books?
Ooh, oh gosh, I read.
That's a really hard question.
Yeah, just because I'm a big reader. Well, I have to say my comfort read is always Pride and Prejudice. Like whenever I'm just having a bad day, I'll just pick up Pride and Prejudice. I love historical romance. Again, to me, it's a fantasy world that I get to just lose myself into, like, you know, dukes and earls and all that kind of stuff. But something that I know that someone will love, oh boy. You know, it's always backfired on me, because every time I've recommended a book, someone's like, oh, I didn't really like it. So it's a tough one.
That's our fear too.
We do it all the time.
And it's like, and you take it personally. You're like, really? Because I love that book.
So I recommend. I'm like, oh, it sucks for you.
Yeah. So I recommended
even between me and Jenny. She's liked the book, and I was just like, oh, it's not my favorite, and I really loved the book, and she was like, really? I DNF'd it, and I'm like, what?
It's incredible. I know.
All love what we love, you know. So.
And I'm also a mood reader. Like if I'm not in the mood to read a paranormal or historical, then yeah, I'm definitely a mood reader for sure. But so one of the books have you heard of Lisa Kleypas? She's written like Sugar Daddy. So I recommend, I love her. I'll read, like, she's a one-click author for me. Like she writes a book, I will buy the book. And then I sent her book to a friend, and she's like, no, I really didn't like it. I'm like, what? And I felt like I had to defend it.
That's how I feel about The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi. I feel like a lot of people would not like that book, so I don't recommend it, but it's my favorite book in the whole world. And I DNF'd it when I first read it. I was like, oh,
really?
I don't like this at all. And then like something just kept like bringing me back to it. I kept thinking about the main character. And I was like, I'm going to read it again. And it became my favorite book ever. So
I love that story.
Mhm.
See, I'm that person. I never DNF books, even if I hate them. I have to finish it. I need to know if there's a redeeming quality, and then I'll be mad at myself if there isn't. But I guess just generally, I love a happy ending, and I find myself not liking books that don't have who have sad endings. And I know that's real life, but I guess that's why I read, to escape. I want the happy ending.
I want happily ever afters too.
Yes, I think it was
I love
Jessica
happily ever
Sorensen.
after.
Jessica Sorensen wrote a book which I thought was a romance, but like he dies in the end. And I know I just gave it away, but I didn't give you the title. That just broke me. I couldn't read a book for a week after that. I just couldn't. I'm like, oh, this is not supposed to happen.
John Green did that to me, and I was in my late teens, early 20s, and I came out of my room as if I knew these people and was boo-hooing. My mom and my sisters were like, what's going on? And I'm holding up a book and they're like, oh my gosh, Louise, really? And I'm like, you don't understand. So it's just like, that was the first time where I read something that didn't end in a happily ever after. And I was just like distraught. And I'm just like, how do you come back from this?
I know. It's so true.
Scary, but you know, it's real life at times, you know. We can't always have that. But I prefer happily ever after. Like you can cry, that's fine, but like I want a happily ever after in the end. Like make me cry in the middle and then just make me happy in the end.
Same. I'm the same way too. Like I can feel every emotion. In fact, I think that's a sign of a great book is if I feel emotion. Like even if I hate that character or I'm angry or I want to throw the book across the room, like I still think that's a great book because it made me feel something. It's the ones that are just like blah to me that I just want to hurry up and get through them. But when you make me feel something, I think that's just art in general, right? Like you look at a painting and if it makes you feel something, then it's a beautiful painting to you.
Exactly.
Very true.
So would you say historical fiction would be your favorite genre, or is there another genre that you enjoy reading?
My go-to is definitely historical fiction. Like I love me a good Scotsman any day. That's a great story for me. Call me last anytime. I'm there. I don't know.
I think into like historical fantasy lately.
I'm trying.
It's starting to become one of my favorite genres to read.
Okay, so that's what started me on the genre was Outlander. So that historical fantasy started me on the genre. And then I kind of just went to just clean romance because again, I want my happily ever after. I also like an 8-book series that is dependent on reading the first book. Sometimes it's too much of a commitment for me personally. Like I love jumping around. So I'll take a book that just has a beginning and an end. But I love the whole, like the Bridgerton series where each family member has their story. I've always loved that, where you feel like you've seen a glimpse of the character and you can't wait for their story. And that's what I try to emulate as well. Because as a reader, I enjoy that.
Yeah, like a good standalone series.
Exactly.
That. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
Now, is there anything else coming up for you? Any book signings that you like to do? Any virtual events that you want to talk about?
Oh, I haven't done any virtual events, but that's a great idea. I'm thinking of doing my first book signing this August. It'll be my 10th book published in August. Will be the third book of the series. So definitely stay tuned. I will be announcing something. So if anyone's in the Toronto area, but I would love to do something virtually. Maybe I could do it at the same time virtually. That might be fun.
Yeah. I like watching those because I don't get to go to book signings that often. And we don't really have any here in Massachusetts to go to. We usually drive more than an hour to get to anything. So virtual signings are it for me.
Yeah.
Well, one of my most popular videos is my husband took a video of me signing out my book at my local library, like Violet Sky, when it was my first book and it was in the library. I cried. And I guess the lady at the counter had no idea why I was crying signing out a book.
That's hilarious.
And then one of my friends works at the library. She's like, I told her like you were the author, and she's like, oh my gosh, she should have said something. I wouldn't have looked so strange about crying. But anyway, that was one of the most popular videos because I guess people saw me go through that moment. And I think a virtual signing would be very similar, where you feel like you're there with the author as they're meeting people and really being in that reader space, which I would love to do. Like, that's why I got into PR, is like, I love speaking with people. I love connecting with people. And that's been the drawback of being an author, is that it's such a lonely business, because that's just me and my computer. And I think that's why I like writing with my friend, is that at least I can connect with someone and have that water cooler talk and struggle and all of that.
Yeah. I think doing something together, like you could do it with a friend, like an author friend, do Q&As together and do a virtual event like that, and have like people send questions and you guys can just answer them. Sorry.
No, that is a fantastic, I don't know, I've never even thought of that. That is an amazing idea.
Jenny with the ideas.
Okay. Just because I like watching that.
Yeah, I do too. I do too. It's fun.
Yeah. If you ever do anything like that, you can send it to us and we'll share it along with this, and then like make it a thing shared on our stories.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. I would love that.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to talk about? Anything else about the book? Now, when does it come out? You can tell us that.
Okay. So Protecting Nikole came out June 27th. Protecting Christina comes out July 17th. And Protecting Haley comes out August 7th. So all 3 books will be out by summer.
It's really back to back to back.
Back to back to back. Yeah. Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
Awesome. Love that. Love it.
Well, it builds a little anticipation, but at the same time, I know there are readers out there that won't start a series until there's at least 3 books. And I'm one of those people. So no judgment. So I thought, okay, let me just prepare it that way, write it that way. And it was also less pressure. I think it's really difficult to start writing when I'm kind of in the headspace of interacting with people about one book, and then I'm supposed to be writing the other one. It was just easier to just write them, be in their world, understand them. And I don't feel like I have to go back and connect with the characters. I'm already in there.
That makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. Just like sticking with it, going through, because like you said, you're already in their world. So to like stop and then go back, I feel like that would be even a longer process, even harder, because maybe they're not feeling what they were feeling that first go around.
Exactly. Or like even something simple as, oh, what was the name of her boss? Like one of those things that you're now going back because it's been months. So I thought, no, this is all makes sense. And I get the way that emotion, like I said, the way I write is very Cancer-ish, where I don't plan a lot. So that emotion of what I felt when I wrote that scene, like, for example, in Protecting Christina, there is a scene where she is alone in a cell with her previous abuser. And I hadn't written anything like that since the mix-up. And it's just so powerful to me to have that opportunity to just fight back, and the emotions of what that feels. And I heard the term recently called feminine rage. And I didn't understand what that meant. And I think it's because so often we suppress our feelings. And I think I've been fortunate enough to express them now through characters. But I think as women, we all need to find that outlet to express ourselves, to express when we're angry, and to express when we're not okay. That, I don't know, I know I was raised that like a good girl is always in a good mood and things have to be okay. And if you're not happy, you will get happy, So I think it's just, I'm trying to teach my kids, at least, just be honest with yourself. I know there's a time and place, like you can't go to work all upset and everybody know that you're all upset all the time. But there's a time and place that if you're upset, take 10 minutes before you get to work and find a way to release that stress for yourself. It's healthy to do that.
Right. You're allowed to be upset. You're allowed to be stressed. You're allowed to be anxious, all the good stuff. You're allowed to do it. You know?
And that is so empowering to know that you can be that way, or it's normal to be that way, or whatever someone wants to think. But I don't know, it was definitely a game changer for me, because as I mentioned, I was always, and probably still am, a people pleaser, but it's a way to say, you can say no without being unliked, you know? And I realized that was also a lightning bulb moment where I said no and that person wasn't upset. They're like, okay, so when is a good time? You know, that was how simple the question went. And I thought, oh my gosh, all these years.
I could have said no every time.
Yeah, and people are more understanding than I think we imagine them to be.
Yeah, that's true.
So true.
Yeah.
Well, I think we could talk to you for so much longer.
Yes.
I feel like I've known you guys forever.
This brings us to the end of the episode. We are so happy that you came on. It was so much fun talking to you and finally meeting you.
Yes.
Thank you. I feel the same. I have to say, like I mentioned, I know Jenny's Instagram was one of the first I followed. And I have to say you were one of the people who left a review that really motivated me to just keep going. When you think you're just shouting into like the universe and no one hears you, and then you hear a few people get back to you that they enjoyed it, it's like
I could cry.
No, thank you. I really, really appreciate it. So this is a really, really great moment that I get to express that to you.
It's like a full circle moment.
Yeah, I'm very happy. I'm happy you kept it going, because I've read every single one of your books except Envy so far, and then now your new series. So I'm really happy that you kept it going.
I started with the
and I know, I get it. My TBR is endless as well. It's just like, you know, the shiny new toy gets your attention.
Yeah, all the time.
I was telling Jenny, I was just like, I can't meet her and like not have read one of her books. Like that's like my biggest fear. It's like, but what do I talk about? Like I'm not familiar. And I'm just like, you know what? I gotta read at least one. And I told Jenny, I was like, I read it in a day. Like I sat there and I was like, this is so good. And I just ate it up.
I get that a lot and I love it. It is my favorite feedback that you read it in a day, because that's when I know, like when I'm telling everyone like I can't do this, I gotta read, that's how I know I'm really into a book.
Awesome. It was good. It was good.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on. We'll keep in touch and we'll let you know when we're going to post this and send you all the good stuff. Okay.
Sounds great. Thank you guys both for the opportunity.
Thank you for coming on.
Thank
Bye.
Bye.